Thank you, thank you. Appreciate the introduction, and I'm happy to be here. I want to get right into the conversation because we have a short amount of time and I want to leave time for any questions. So think of those burning questions as you hear them talk, and then you can come up to the microphones when the time is right. Okay, so first, you both have new projects that are out this summer. I think both in July, if I'm not mistaken, right? Paul, you had one. Tiffany, you as well. Let's start first with Blood in the Water. Tell us a little bit about that, your latest book, for those maybe who aren't familiar.
Sure. So Blood in the Water is my middle grade debut. It is about a girl named Kaylani, a Brooklyn girl named Kaylani, who has been forced to spend a couple of her weeks of her summer in Martha's Vineyard after her father's recent incarceration. And Martha's Vineyard is known for being very much a haven, beautiful haven for an upper echelon of the Black community. But while out there, a popular boy is found murdered on the beach, and no one knows if it's a shark attack or a murderer on the loose. And Kaylani is determined to help her friends basically solve the mystery.
Okay, and Paul, tell us about your new book, Another?
Yes, and that was such a great encapsulation. I'm so bad at that. So Another is also my middle grade debut, and the main character is a 12-year-old named Casey Wilson, and the book is set place in sort of the first year of the pandemic, where Casey is not remote learning, but hybrid learning, and while he's doing that, he gets cyberbullied because he's dealing with facial tics that happen. That's really sort of the background, but fast forward. It's now April of 2022. It's school vacation week, but Casey's feeling extra alone and extra isolated. And then this weird old guy shows up at his house with a burlap sack. And he says, "Hey, I have a new playmate for Casey." And when he opens the sack, there's a clay mannequin boy. So I say mannequin, he doesn't really have facial features, just like shadows for eyes or a nose. But it's alive, or he's alive, and he can sculpt smiles on his face. And, yeah, it seems like the perfect playmate for somebody, right?
Yeah, well, and the parallels I just found so interesting between the two of you. These new books out in July, and both your debut in middle grade. Just as an author who has had previous success, what made you want to step into writing this genre for this age group?
You want to go first?
For me, it was a total, I would say accident, but it wasn't like a planned career pivot. I just happened to have the idea to write this story that features a 12-year-old protagonist. Now, aside from writing, I've also been a high school math teacher for 30 years. I started teaching when I was 13. I was like the Doogie Howser. So I have a lot of experience with kids around Casey's age. So I know this probably isn't the best way to go about a writing career, but the way I've gone about it is I'll write it and let someone else figure out what to do with it. So it's I wrote the story, and that's
actually good.
I think it's middle grade, so we'll see what happens.
Yeah. No, I like that. So I, while writing, I do write a lot of hard topics, a lot of dark topics. And when I would go on tour and I would be out and about, I would look in a crowd and I would see a 9-year-old holding my book Grown, and I'm like.
She covered her mouth over here.
You see what I would internally cringe, give me that. And I realized that, some of my readers, though I have a lot of adult readership, I do have a lot of younger readers. And I was I want to write a book more in their worlds and for them specifically. So that was sort of how it kind of pivoted. I was well, let me try. And there's not a lot of thrillers in the middle grade space, so it was definitely a challenge, but I was up to it because I don't want to see any more 9-year-olds that book in their hand. So that's basically it.
Yeah. Well, so Tiffany, you touched a little bit about the Martha's Vineyard and where the book is set, but where else did you draw inspiration from for Blood in the Water?
Honestly, no, that was it.
Okay.
I used to go to Martha's Vineyard a lot when I was, in my 20s and early, and with my family. And if you've ever been to Martha's Vineyard, it is just this gorgeous. I know it's really popular now, but before even it was just this place where you go and it's very magical and beautiful. And me being the horror lover that I am, every night would be how do I make this place scary? How do I mess things up? And it just seemed like the perfect, like, I guess, you know, legends have taught us, like, you always want to set a mystery on an island. And that just seemed like the perfect island, right? Yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree. And so, Paul, you talked about also your teaching.
Yeah.
Do your students ever give you ideas for things they want you to like write about or something they want to read?
Sometimes they appear as characters, or at least their names. Sometimes I ask for permission. Now, my favorite part is, you know, as a writer, being around young people.
Yeah.
It's such a great lesson in voice. Especially, I teach at a very small school, so like, it feels like the slang changes every 5 years, and it can be very sort of culturally wide, specific, but also regionally specific, and even school specific.
Yeah.
You know, and of course, like any cringy math teacher, you know, I try to say that's cap to them or something, and they all laugh like, don't say that. Somewhere my daughter is crying. Like, so to me, that's the part I definitely, you know, if I'm in a way like an energy vampire, I feel like I definitely get, you know, a lot of just, you know, inspiration, just generalized inspiration. Like, it's just fun to be around young people that, you know, they just have so much energy and always challenging me in fun ways and some less fun ways. Yeah. And I will say, in my lowest moments as a teacher, when kids are giving me grief, because they don't think I'm cool, like I'm their math teacher. When they're giving me grief, I say, hey, outside of this room, there are actually people who think I'm cool. And they're like, no, that's not true.
Yeah. And I'm learning some of the, like Riz. I recently found out about Riz, and I actually like that one. You know? No? Okay, yeah.
It's awful.
I try to use it at least once a week. So, I found it interesting, both of you had you know, some projects where you have seen them turn into, you know, on screen as well. You know, what's that like? And is it, as you're writing, I've always been curious, as you're writing, I know you don't write to one day sell it to be on television, but do you kind of picture that it could one day be seen on TV, on the big screen, on the small screen as you're writing?
Oh, well, okay. I think all authors, in their heart of hearts, want every book to become a movie or a series, something like that. And a few of mine are optioned, a few of them are like, you know, in the works and stuff. I think I always think cinematically because that was my education background. Like, I'm a film major, like through and through, like very much horror school film nerd, like from high school till grad school. So I think I always will write cinematically, and I always will write, like, I'm more like a scenester than a, you know, plotter or pantser. Sure. So I think that kind of like speaks to it. So yeah, I think I will always want every book, even if it can't, every book to be some type of TV or something.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great answer. I would say similar. I mean, it's so wonderful to see so many young readers out there, because when I was a kid, I wasn't like a big reader. I mean, I was a good student. I always read what I was assigned, but as a child of the 80s, I just watched a ton of cable television and just shot basketballs in my backyard. That's what I did. And I didn't fall in love with reading until like I was 22, so I feel like I'm always playing catch up. So my first, as you were talking about your first lessons in story, for me was almost exclusively film and television. Yeah. But the thing that I'm very proud of now is I much prefer books over movies. Even though I still love movies and TV, you know, it's flipped. And when I'm writing, I never think, what would this look like? Obviously, it would be great. I want everything to be made because I get some money, which is nice. I'm not going to lie to you. But like when I write, I definitely don't think that way. In fact, she probably wasn't the first, but I'll credit Zadie Smith, who'd said, if you're writing a book, you should be treating that story as this is the best way to tell the story. That's kind of the way I approach it. And I think I showed some restraint by not wearing my "The Book Was Better" T-shirt today. This is the last thing I will say.
We're proud of you.
Thank you.
So Tiffany, you mentioned, and we heard the HU cheers in the crowd. Obviously, you know, went to school just down the street here at Howard University. You know, I didn't go to Howard, but I know you followed up with right? While you were at Howard, and a student there, obviously you were studying film, but you know, did you kind of think even back then as you were reading a lot of material, I'm sure, for school, textbooks and things, but did you think that one day you would be an author when you were just a student?
Oh my God, this is like a slightly embarrassing story. So I started I'm not even going to age myself, I'm old. So I started Howard in year 2000. And I knew I was going to be a film major. I already started a lot of my film classes and stuff like that. And there used to be this conference called Sister to Sister that came to Howard. And they had a panel, and there was an author on this panel, and she sounded so amazing. And so I stood online. I bought her book because I didn't even want to go to this conference. I was sort of like, it was cold out. It was January. I didn't want to be outside. And I go to the conference, and my friends dragged me there, and she sounded amazing. So I bought her book. I stood online. It was the first author, one that I ever met, one that I ever had someone sign my book. And as soon as I walked up to her, I just blurted out, I want to be an author too. I don't even know where that came from. And that was wild to me because I definitely was full-fledged film major. I knew exactly where my track was going to go. And she was like, okay. And she wrote a note in her book and gave me her number. And that author, and it was on her tour, and that author was Sister Soldier, The Coldest Winter Ever.
Oh, well, buried the lead there.
And I never used that number, by the way, because I was too shook. But I coveted that book because that was the first time I ever said out loud to someone proudly that I wanted to be an author. Because I think it was always something that I held inside, because people, when you say you want to be a writer, everyone thinks broke, starving artist. I was going to live on a sofa. At least in my family, you know what I'm saying? Everyone just assumed that was going to be my future. So it was not even an option for me to be that. But I always knew I was going to be an author. I knew at 4, but it was a long journey here. And that was the first time. So I always think of her book and that moment, because it was her first tour, basically, the first time I was like, hey, I want to be an author. But after that, I never said it. I went on and, worked in television for 15 years. And I never said it again to any of my colleagues or anything, but I secretly was in the background, working on stories and stuff. So so that was my journey from Howard. So it's kind of funny now that I've never taken a creative writing class to date. I've never... I want to. I mean, maybe one day I'll go and get my MFA, even though my girlfriends are always like, don't do that. Don't embarrass yourself and be up there and try and teach the teacher how to write.
And Paul, what about you? Math teacher, that's definitely one part of your brain. Yeah. And then what made you want to start writing?
It's a little bit hard to describe because I got my math degree undergraduate in Providence. I was a math humanities major, but the humanities was just a hodgepodge of stuff. But I'll never forget my last semester, senior year in college, I had to take an English Lit 101, essentially, a basic literature class. But the teacher was really cool. I was really, and still am, into punk music, and the teacher liked punk too, and so we bonded, and he had us read some stories, and I'll never forget reading Joyce Carol Oates' Where Are You Going, Where Have You Been? And T.C. Boyle's Greasy Lake, and thinking, oh, I didn't know people wrote things like this. And so then I went off to grad school and fell in love with reading. And the other thing was I was just, I didn't have a very good social experience. And like a lot of people in middle school and high school, I had scoliosis, and I was a very weird-looking teenager. But it just took me a while to blossom and have the confidence to be like, oh, it's okay to like things. And I wish more younger people and more adults too would just have the confidence or just the belief to say it's okay to like things. It's okay to be passionate about the things you enjoy. So I first started messing around. I wanted to play guitar first. If I had a time machine and someone gave me a choice, I would choose a mediocre punk musician over a writer. But unfortunately, I figured out I was a better writer than musician. So, but it was a very long, slow. I started messing around with writing in the mid-90s, and I was just patient, took my time with it, and slowly started making short story sales and just stuck with it.
Love it, love it. Okay, so we have some time for questions. And so if you have one, start to make your way. There's a microphone here and one here. And so hopefully we have some folks come up for some questions. And while we wait for them, I just want to ask y'all both real quick, how can we best support you, right? And the work that you're doing. I know buy the book, that's easy, but what else can we do to support? Because I feel like books are just so important, especially these days. And having access to them. So how can we best support you all and maybe work that you even have coming up here, soon?
Well, I think support your libraries like you are today. Honestly, I think it's one of the biggest ways you can help all writers. Don't use AI and shun people who do. And I don't say that. I was a part of a lawsuit suing ChatGPT, OpenAI for 2 years. I just stepped out of it, but only because they put everybody into one case and they didn't really need me anymore. So now it's fun. I can say anti-AI stuff without worrying about it being in court now. Yeah, I mean, just tell your friends if you enjoy a book, talk about it.
Yeah, I would say that's always like the best way to like help us as authors is spread the word. Word of mouth is like, our best friend. And also, like supporting us in all avenues because we are definitely like under attack from various places. So yeah. But anyway, yes.
Excellent.
And don't support AI. Yeah. Okay.
I wanted to swear, but I won't.
Yeah. We're doing good up here.
All right. So we'll start right here. Just get a little closer. Speak right into the mic. Tell us your name and your question.
I'm Josie, and my question is, what inspired you to be a scary story author? Like, scary stories over, like, fiction, romance.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah.
Do I go first? Or?
Yeah. I've been watching horror movies since I was, like, 5. And that's literally, and I'm a rare breed. There's not a lot of black kids who were out there doing that. And because of that, I also was reading a lot of scary stories. I always tell the story of how, like, my teacher literally brought me to the table where they were selling the first Goosebumps. That's how old I am. Like, and I read nothing but R.L. Stine and went straight to Stephen King and nothing in between. Like, I was always like that girl. And because I didn't see anyone that looked like me in my stories, in the stories I was reading, I made it a point to always write kids who look like me because I know that there are more Tiffany's out there. So yeah, but I've always loved scary stories. I mean, why not?
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Really quickly, I would just add a very similar story. Like my earliest memories of watching movies in particular were horror movies. Like I grew up in New England. In our area, they had a program on the weekends called Creature Double Feature. Every Saturday, and the first movie was always a Godzilla movie. There's my little Godzilla. And that's what drew me in as a kid who loved dinosaurs, as a stereotypical kid who liked dinosaurs. And the second movie was always a horror movie, and those scared the heck out of me. Like I still am a card-carrying scaredy cat. And, like I used to sleep with stuffed animals around my head. My brother and I shared a room, and I would send him upstairs first at night to see if if the boogeyman didn't get him, it was safe for me.
Then it was safe for you to go.
That was strategy.
Yeah.
That was
Yes.
good. Yes.
All right, let's go over here.
Good afternoon. First, I just want to thank you for Monday's Not Coming. That should be required reading for every new teacher that are teaching in urban settings. I first encountered Monday's Not Coming when I saw my daughter reading it, and she was crying. I said, "What's wrong?" She said, "I'm reading this book, Mom." And she handed it to me. I was in grad school at the time, getting my master's in arts and teaching. I read that book, and I've taken that book with me to this day, H.U. Bison, as a cornerstone of how I deal with students, children, and families that are in transition. My question is this: in what ways in your new writings and your future writings do you target social issues and social constructs that are nuanced and infuse those into your stories? Thank you so much.
Thank you. No, I really appreciate that. Thank you so much. And it's great to talk about Monday's Not Coming while I'm in DC, especially. I think that I never targeted to go out and talk about social issues. I was just always talking about like what is the issue around this specific like case I was following, because a lot of my books are loosely inspired by real cases. I know for a fact that I will not do any real cases with middle grade. None of my books in middle grade are going to be like real cases, because I have learned through TikTok that y'all will go and find all the details and all the pictures, and I'm like, don't do that. But I think it's important, especially when we're talking about Black kids, is to also like give a full context, like the full scope of what things are happening. And especially as a kid who grew up in an inner city, as in Brooklyn in the 90s, there are so many untold stories that we were told not to talk about. And my goal is to actually talk about them. But not talk about them in a preachy way, but also talk about them in a radicalized way to make sure that we radicalize kids. Because if we don't radicalize kids, we are going to end up with the same generation that has been sort of governing us all this time. So at this point, I'm all about learning and growing and like making sure that like my message is for kids. I know a lot of adults read my books, but my message is for kids. I'm making sure that I teach them how to be, and that is like, you know, if that's my only purpose and goal in life, I'm good with that. Thank you.
Thank you. Over here.
Hi, my name is Louise. And how long did it take to write your guys' books?
Great question, thank you. So in my case, it took me about 6 months. For my adult novels, it usually takes about 12 to 15 months. But when I say 6 months, that was like how long it took to have a full draft that I turned into my editor. But then we still have like a few months of edits that happens too.
Yeah, I was about 4 months for mine, but that was only because I was late. It's a postpartum book. I wrote it right after I like basically had a baby, and so yeah, that's why. But it usually will take more than like 6 or a whole year to write the book. So don't rush books. Don't be like me.
Great question. Thank you. Okay, over here.
Do you illustrate your books or make any graphic novels?
Oh, I don't illustrate my books. I strictly draw stick figures. I don't. Yeah. And what about you?
I always wished I could draw. My daughter is a studio art major. She's great. And an amateur tattooist. She actually did a couple of the tattoos on me in her bedroom, which was a very strange experience. But no, for my book, the publisher hired an illustrator who did 8 amazing illustrations, including the cover,
Wow.
which was wonderful.
That's cool. Thank you for your
Thank
question.
you. Great question. Over here.
So as a middle grade reader, I have 2 things to say. One is people don't appreciate the gap in middle grade like horror and murder mystery novels, which is I like that kind of thing. So
Yes.
I would like to thank both of you for writing books like this to fill that gap. And also as somebody who is currently in the brainstorming phase for a middle grade murder mystery novel, I would like to ask for some tips.
Wow.
Okay. First, you're doing the best job right now is you're starting now. I wish I was brave like you to start exactly where you were right now, because I would have had 1 billion books by now. So once again, don't be like me. Start writing right now. You actually are closer to your main character than I will ever be to the main characters that I write. So I think that that's the best. But I guess the biggest tip is to keep reading. Reading, and like I said, I didn't go to school for writing. The way I learned how to write is by reading other people's books. And so learning how to read, how to write by reading is like your best kind of like way of doing it. So keep on reading as many mysteries as you can get your hands on, but also read fantasy too, because that helps you kind of like world build.
Yeah.
It helps you kind of build stories as well too.
Yeah, I mean, amazing answer, everything there. I would only add, I try to read as widely as possible. All things different from horror, from just like straight literary everywhere, because like my fun part, the thing I get a lot of ideas from is a book that's not in my genre, and I'm like, ooh, what if I added a little horror element to this or something?
Yeah.
And as far as writing goes, like, go back to the earlier question, if it takes 6 months to a year, that's a long time. Give yourself permission to be patient. Like if you're only writing like a couple hundred words a day, that's fine. Or some days you have 0 words. I mean, that still happens to me, as an adult. There are some days that are, you just don't get a lot done. And then there are days where it comes easier. I think the biggest thing if you want to write is just trying to make it like doesn't have to be every day, but make it a habit. Like when you make it a habit, that trains your brain to start actually bringing you more ideas.
Thank you.
Thank
Sure.
you.
Thank you.
Hello.
Hi, my question is for Ms. Jackson. Hi, how are you?
Hi.
First of all, I just want to say, fellow HBCU alum, but I am Bowie Stage, with all due respect.
Okay.
And then I want to say also thank you as a survivor of SA. I read Grown when I was in college, studying for English. Life-changing, and you awakened something in me that I'm fearful of. But I wanted to ask, as a grown woman who enjoys your YA novels, like their adult novels, how do you scale the content of your writing to your audience?
Ooh, so I didn't realize how many adults were actually reading my books until I started to like tour, and then it was like, there's no kids in the audience. Like, what's going on? But I always give the analogy that I think that there's so many adults reading my books because we are all reparenting our inner child. And a lot, especially with Black women, there's a lot of unanswered questions that we had from teenhood that we weren't allowed to ask. And so I think that we're all kind of finding ourselves through teen literature. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with reading teen literature. And I scream this from like, the rooftops. Like, everything is great about adult, but there is something very healing about reading something about a teenager. So I think that is one of the things that I always like look towards is like, I'm still never going to particularly write my stories that are YA and give it for adults. But I am going to answer a lot of questions that you probably are looking for that you didn't even realize that you've kind of found and grown as well too. And so even myself, like, because I was definitely a victim from Grown, I've even learned some things about myself just by writing it. So you just never know when you start opening up and writing things.
Thank you.
All right.
I love your t-shirt. Oh my God.
Yeah.
He has an unreliable narrator t-shirt. I need this.
What authors do you guys each really enjoy that you think would surprise your fans to hear you write? And this is a little bit on the path of reading outside your genre, but do you have any favorites that you think your fans would be like, wow, I didn't think he'd read that or she'd read that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I don't know if it would be a surprise, but I have a Roberto Bolaño tattoo from 2666, which is a big, giant novel that takes weeks to read. Patrick DeWitt also he writes sort of like dry literary comedy, and it's just so funny and just so fun to read. I'll just go with those two, I guess.
Yeah, I love, people are always surprised to learn that I read a lot of romance novels. Like, I need a palate, everyone needs a palate cleanse. Yeah. Like, there's every occasional, like, naughty book in my, like, Kindle, like, there's children here, so I'm just trying to, like, But yeah, I read a lot of romance, and I think it doesn't particularly help me write romance. Like, I don't think I'm the, Yeah, we'll stick with horror. We're going to be over here.
Okay. Well, thank you for the question. Unfortunately, we have to leave it there. But if we could give Tiffany and Paul a round of applause for chatting with us this afternoon.